Okay, before we get started doing the white box model, let's talk really quickly about which modeling app to use. You can ask this to a lot of different people and they'll give you a specific favorite, like, Maya, 3D Studio Max, Modo. Lots of people have their preferences. Honestly, I have mine, but they kind of don't really matter. The truth is you can use pretty much any modeling app as long as it has this handful of basic tools. Now, if you're making, advanced characters, you're doing all kinds of animation or things like this, yeah, you're going to need specific tool sets to do various things. But, especially if you're working indie, you don't necessarily need to buy a full, multi-$1,000 copy of something. You can use even affordable alternatives like Cheetah or Silo, or there's just a whole bunch of really good apps out there that'll still do the trick that cover all the basics. Now, especially if you're a designer and you're doing level design and you're building some of these things, you can really get by on pretty basic straight-ahead tools. And the truth is, probably 80 or 90% of the tools that you're going to use in one of those really big expensive ones are going to be the same basic tools over and over, day in and day out. So I'm just going to go over those really quickly so that you guys can kind of make your own choice. You can check to see whether any modeling app you may already have is going to work. I'm not going to teach specifically modeling tools, anything other than just this little bit of overview I'm going to give you right here. I'm not going to teach it throughout the rest of the course, but you're going to be able to follow along with your own modeling app as you go along. The only thing I'm going to say is a brief word of caution about some apps. For instance, Blender is a great 3D app. It has tons of functionality, tons of features. I know people do amazing stuff with it, but it's really, really different than a lot of other 3D apps. Most 3D applications are pretty similar in how they work. So if you learn how to use any one of the majors like Maya, Max, Modo, Softimage, any of those, you'll pretty much be able to sit down at any other one and go to town. And if you know one of them and you get a job somewhere, generally they're like, whatever, you can learn the next one pretty easy. But once in a while you run into another tool that is designed just so differently that the skills do not apply. So just want you to know that. Keep that in mind as you look at various apps. If my skill's going to go across the line or not. Does that matter to you? Maybe it doesn't. So there we go. All right, so let's take a look I've got a copy of Maya open right here. And there's so much to an app like this, and we're not even going to talk about most of it. In fact, I'm going to, not even get into any of these, right? I'm not even getting into any of this timeline stuff or any of that. So what we're going to look at is, first of all, the basics. You need to be able to create polygon primitives. So for instance, here we've got some spheres and cubes and cylinders and all that. Pretty much, I'm going to use the cube over and over. So there I just double click. F zooms me in. In this particular case, yours will probably have a different zoom. And you want to be able to view, like here I can view in wireframe. For instance, I'm just in wireframe, there I'm in shaded. You're going to want to be able to look at both, right? Go back and forth. And I honestly don't know any modeler made in the last 15 years that won't do both of those. One thing is really nice is if you can numerically change its position. So here's the translate. If I just type in a 1 and hit return, see it moves my cube. If I type in a 0 here and a 0 there, now my cube is at the world center. If I zoom in and you can see these black lines coming out, lets me know I'm at world center. And I'm going to talk more about why that's important as we go along, but we will be modeling from world center most of the time. And there it is. That's my cube. So I can rotate it and translate it and do all this stuff numerically. Like if I wanted to make it twice as big, I could just change the number there. So it's nice if you can numerically adjust your models, things like that. I can also click directly on it. And if I hit, in this case, it's W, E, and R, will switch me between, this is a translate mode. And if you watch this little thing here, as I move it, the number is updating, right? Which is pretty cool. So these two things relate to each other. So you can numerically place them like I showed you, and you can manually move the stuff around. This works the same for rotate. You want to be able to rotate your objects, and you want to be able to scale your objects that way. And that means just like in any direction. So that way I can really quickly come in and make like a tabletop or whatever, right? or platform. In this case, it's probably a platform I'm going to walk on, or walls, or various things you'd put in a level. So you want to be able to do those sorts of things really quickly and easily with your modeling application. Again, almost every app does, but there you go. So that's your basic select and scale. Next, what you want to do is be able to cut this thing up and turn it into other shapes. And there are all kinds of advanced modeling tools. Like for instance, in Maya, I mean, look right here. There's a bunch of stuff, and we're only looking at 2 menus. But what I'm really going to use, they call it a split polygon tool. Most of the time, see I got this little arrow now. If I click on an edge, I'm going to be able to cut a new shape as I move around. I'm cutting a new shape in right like that, see? So now I've got this new shape. Okay, I've chopped in some things, and that's a horrible shape. I'm not recommending everybody make one, but just as an example, that leads me to the next part. Just we've been selecting these, just like we've been able to do that. You want to be able to select the components. So here I've right-clicked, and I can choose an edge, a vertex, a face, or various other things. But for instance, this is the whole object, right? I can select off or on. That's picking the whole object and lets me move or scale or whatever the whole object. But if I choose, let's for instance say just the edges. Now look, as I mouse over it, highlights, so I can pick, for instance, just this edge, and I'm moving only that piece, right? So it's really key that you be able to pick just pieces. And then maybe if I come in and I select vertices, now I can select just these 2 verts right there, which are these 2 little dots, right? And then I can move like those. So you can use these translation tools on the whole object. Again, like this, I can move and do whatever. I can do it on just a component like that. And that's pretty important. You want to be able to do all that stuff, or else you won't be able to really model anything. And again, this is a horrible shape. We never want to do that, but we'll talk about that more when we're actually whiteboxing. The face is another thing you want to select, and that's just, this big piece. And the reason why is because another tool we're going to use over and over and over and over again is a little thing called extrude. So if I look through here, I usually make shortcuts down here, but extrude, I'm going to select that tool. And what I've done is I've extruded this face, and I actually have to manually drag it out. But see, what I've done is I've got myself some new edges around that. So I can make, again, with my tools, right? I can come in and now do that and say move it down and then rotate it and move it something like that. And then I've still got that face selected, so now I could extrude it again, pull it out again, right? See where this is going? So now I can start to make much more, this one isn't, but I can make much more interesting shapes just by cutting and extruding, right? Pretty neat. So, and then you decide like, hey, what if I decide this is too chunky and I want to do something later, right? So I'll come back in here and choose, once again, that split polygon tool. And let's just start cutting it right there. And again, you could use some fancy edge splitter and stuff like that. I don't care at this stage. I'm not modeling a character. And then I could come into edges, and in this case, I'll just double click to select them all. And now I can, whoops, if you click on the right thing. So I can scale that in, right? Now I'm starting to make more interesting shapes or whatever. So there you go. You can see right away, I think, that was a cube a second ago. And with some of these really, really basic tools, you can do quite a lot. So you want to be able to select the components of the object and do translations of scale, translate, and rotate. You want to be able to some kind of cut faces. There are some tools that are like, let me show you another one. A lot of apps have ones like this where you can, they call it split polygons, what I've been using. You can cut faces and just get like this big line. See, I'm drawing this line as I move, and you let go and it just chops this whole, just kind of does this big crude slice across it. That's pretty good too, but it's not as precise. You're not going to use it as much. So most of these advanced modeling tools we're never going to touch. Right? We're just not going to need to. If you know how to use them, probably sometimes you can get some stuff done faster with them, but not everything. Sometimes you're just going to cut shapes and holes and move stuff around until you like it. So there's that. One other thing you want to be able to do is merge vertices. So if I had, say I had taken all these faces right here. Oops, still cutting, aren't I? But if you wanted to take these verts, let me just get out of this real quick. I'm still in that tool mode. There we go. Let me create a new cube here to show you this. This will be easier. Just delete that guy and get my new cube over here and go like that. Okay. So if I wanted to take these, say these vertices right here, and say snap them to these other ones, I can move them over there, but like, you know, they're not snapping or anything. So I can use a snap tool. In this case, I'm just pressing V and it's snapping to the verts. So I want to be able to snap stuff together like that, because maybe I want to make a wedge, right? Like I did. But now this is two stacked vertices, which is kind of weird. So you want to have a merge vertices, which is in here. I've actually shortcutted it right here, but it takes these two verts and turns them into one vert. So now if I move that around, it's actually stuck them together. So now I have a new shape. It's not like two pieces stuck together. Because see here, you could still, if you can select one and pull it apart, so that's a weird shape, and that's going to start causing all kinds of problems. So if you do that, now it's impossible to pull it apart because it's really just one thing. So merge vertices is pretty important to be able to do. So there you go. All right, notice what I did not say. I did not say fluids or cloth simulation or dynamics or rigging and animating. I didn't say any of that stuff, right? We've just got, 4 or 5 basic tools here, and that is all we're going to use. Again, if you know more advanced modeling tools, great. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. But that little bit over and over is going to, and if you get those down in your modeling tool, spend whatever it takes, a few minutes or a few hours, just model some junk like I did to get the shapes down, and you'll really feel comfortable and be able to work really, really fast as you whitebox levels. Now, let me show you really quickly. I'll put that away, and I'm going to open up another app by Never Center called Silo. And this one, much cheaper. I think it was about $100, something like that, as opposed to, let's just say a lot more for Maya. I can do the same stuff here, right? So I'm going to create a cube. There we go. Got it there. I can move in and out. I can move it. I can scale it. I can rotate it. All the stuff we talked about. I'll do that. I've got some tools in a little toolbar right here, and of course it's all adjustable, right? I can move that over and make custom windows and whatever. So notice I didn't put that in my list of amazing custom windows, right? You just need to be able to do this stuff. But here I've got a cut tool, so I can come in and I can cut a really crazy shape like I talked about in Maya. You can come around and cut whatever you want in here and go nuts. So anyway, I can do stuff like that. I can, it's got a similar selection mode here. You can also use hotkeys, but just showing you. I can come in and select that face that I just did, and maybe I'll pull it out a little bit. It's starting to look a little bit like a mailbox or a dumpster, isn't it? But then up here I've got extrude. So now I can pull that out. And see, the tools look a little different, but they're the same, right? I'm doing the same stuff. So I can extrude and scale and rotate and go on. So your modeling tool might, your package might call it something a little bit different. It might have different looking tools that hang out, all that. But just make sure you can do those same basic things, and you're good to go. You can do tons and tons of stuff. So that's all you're going to need to be able to follow along with the whiteboxing demos. And then also we're going to make some interactive objects along the way when we start wiring things up with Playmaker. So there you go.